On a hot afternoon in Atlanta, a routine traffic stop takes a shocking turn. Officer Mathers, believing he's doing his job, arrests a black woman without a second thought. But as the woman reveals her true identity as the state attorney, everything changes. How did a simple mistake escalate into a moment that could redefine the relationship between the police and the community? With tensions high and emotions running deep, both will face the fallout of their actions. Can they find common ground, or will this incident leave lasting scars? The answers await as the story unfolds. Forever, before we star the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today, and if you enjoy stories like this, don't forger to subscriber, so you never miss a new one. It was a humid afternoon in downtown Atlanta. Officer Greg Mathers sat in his patrol car, sipping his lukewarm coffee, watching the world go by. He had been on the force for over a decade, and in his mind, he knew trouble when he saw it. That was when he spotted a black woman stepping out of a sleek black BMW. She was dressed in a sharp navy blue suit, her heels clicking confidently against the pavement. But something about her rubbed him the wrong way. Maybe it was the car, maybe it was the way she carried herself, or maybe it was just his gut feeling. Mathers took one last sip of his coffee, tossed the cup onto the passenger seat, and stepped out. "Mom," he called out, his voice laced with authority, "can I see some ID?" The woman, startled but composed, turned around slowly. She raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" Mathers crossed his arms. "I need to see some identification. You match the description of someone we're looking for." The woman sighed, shaking her head slightly. "And what exactly is that description?" Mathers hesitated. He hadn't thought that far ahead. "Step over here," he said instead. But the woman didn't move. Instead, she reached into her handbag. That was all the reason Mathers needed. "Hands where I can see them," he barked, reaching for his cuffs. Before she could protest, he grabbed her arm and twisted it behind her back. "You're resisting arrest," he muttered as he snapped the cold steel around her wrist. That was when she laughed, a low, knowing chuckle. "You're making a huge mistake," she said. Mathers rolled his eyes. Yeah, that's what they all say." Then she turned her head slightly and spoke with chilling calm. "I'm Monica Evans, state attorney for Georgia." Officer Mathers froze for half a second. Then he scoffed. "Yeah, right," he muttered, tightening the cuffs. "And I'm the damn mayor." Monica Evans didn't fight. She didn't struggle. She just shook her head, her expression unreadable. "Check my bag," she said coolly. "ID's in there." Mathers wasn't interested. He had arrested enough people who claimed to be someone important. Judges' nieces, politicians' cousins, even a guy who swore he was the governor's personal driver. They all said the same thing. "Tell it to the judge," he said, guiding her toward his squad car. A few bystanders had stopped to watch, phones already out, recording. "Sir, do you even know who that is?" a young man called out from the sidewalk. Mathers ignored him. He pressed Monica down into the back seat and slammed the door shut. As he climbed into the front, his radio crackled to life. "Unit 12, what's your status?" "Detaining a suspect," Mathers responded, keeping his eyes on the road as he pulled away. Silence. Then, 12? What's the suspect's name?" Mathers glanced in the rearview mirror. Monica was sitting back, her face calm but unreadable. He sighed. "Some lady claiming to be Monica Evans." Another pause, then suddenly, "Officer, stand down immediately, release her, now." Mathers blinked. "What?" "You just arrested the state attorney, turn the car around, now." His hands tightened on the wheel. He glanced at Monica again. She was smirking. Mathers could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He reluctantly pulled the car over to the side of the road, his heart racing. What had he done? The realization began to sink in like a heavy stone in his stomach. "Get out of the car," he ordered, his voice barely above a whisper. Monica's smirk widened. "Now you're listening?" He opened the door, still trying to process everything. The humiliation, the backlash from the department, it all played out in his mind like a slow-motion train wreck. As he stepped out, he heard footsteps approaching. 2 officers from the nearby precinct arrived, their faces a mix of confusion and concern. "What's going on here, Mathers?" one of them asked, his eyes darting between the squad car and Monica. Mathers started, but the words wouldn't come. "Let me make this easy for you," Monica interrupted, stepping out of the car, her posture commanding. "You just unlawfully detained me. I'm going to need you to uncuff me, and we can discuss how this will be handled." The second officer's jaw dropped. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," she said, crossing her arms. "You might want to call your supervisor before this escalates further." Mathers stood frozen, the cuffs clinking as he released them. They fell to the ground with a loud thud. "What were you thinking?" the first officer whispered, his eyes wide with disbelief. Monica didn't wait for an answer. She reached into her bag and pulled out her ID, holding it up for them to see. "I'm the state attorney," she repeated, her voice steady. "And I'll be filing a complaint against you, Mathers." For a moment, silence hung in the air. The bystanders watched, some still recording, others exchanging worried glances. "Do you even realize what you just did?" Monica continued, her tone now a mix of anger and authority. "You've just put yourself and this department in a very precarious position." Mathers felt heat rush to his cheeks. I didn't know," he stammered, feeling small under her piercing gaze. "You didn't know because you didn't bother to find out?" she replied sharply. The gravity of the situation weighed heavily on Officer Mathers as he stood there, feeling the heat of humiliation wash over him. The realization that he had misjudged Monica completely hit him like a ton of bricks. The first officer stepped closer to Mathers, lowering his voice. "You need to apologize, man. This is serious." Monica, still holding her ID, fixed her gaze on Mathers, awaiting his next move. Taking a deep breath, he finally managed to find his voice. I'm sorry, Ms. Evans. I should have verified your identity." She nodded, a hint of satisfaction in her expression. "This isn't just about me, it's about the systemic issues that allow such incidents to happen regularly. You have to understand that." Mathers felt the weight of her words. He had always thought of himself as a protector, a defender of the law, but now he was the embodiment of its failures. The second officer finally spoke up. "Let's call this in. We need to inform the sergeant and get this on record." As they turned to make the call, Monica folded her arms, her demeanor shifting from anger to resolve. She had fought hard to earn her position and knew that her voice mattered in situations like this. "Look," she said, addressing Mathers once more, "this isn't just a personal issue. It reflects on how the community views law enforcement. You have an opportunity here to learn and to change." He nodded, realizing the truth in her words. "I understand. I messed up." The first officer came back, shaking his head. "The sergeant is on his way. You better be ready for some questions." "Fine," Mathers replied, swallowing hard. Monica, still composed, glanced at the crowd which had grown larger, drawn in by the commotion. "I want to make sure this doesn't just blow over. We need accountability." Mathers met her gaze. "You have my word. I'll take responsibility." As they waited, the atmosphere shifted from tense to reflective. The crowd was no longer just spectators. They were witnesses to an incident that would resonate throughout the community. Moments later, the sergeant arrived, his expression shifting from confusion to concern as he took in the scene. "What happened here?" he asked, looking from Mathers to Monica. Mathers swallowed hard, ready to admit his mistakes. Mathers took a deep breath, preparing to recount the events that had unfolded. He could feel the weight of responsibility resting on his shoulders as he spoke to the sergeant. "Sir," he began, his voice steady but strained. "I stopped Ms. Evans here because I thought she matched the description of a suspect. I didn't verify her identity before detaining her." The sergeant raised an eyebrow, glancing at Monica, who remained composed, her arms crossed. "And you didn't think to check her ID or ask for her credentials first?" Mathers lowered his gaze, shame flooding his cheeks. "No, sir. I let my assumptions cloud my judgment." The sergeant nodded, taking a moment to absorb the situation. "Ms. Evans, is there anything you'd like to add?" Monica took a step forward, her voice firm but calm. "I understand the challenges officers face every day, but this kind of behavior is unacceptable. It perpetuates a cycle of distrust between law enforcement and the community. We need to work together to change that." The sergeant listened attentively, nodding. "You're absolutely right. We cannot allow biases to interfere with our duty. Mathers, this will need to be documented thoroughly." "Of course, sir," Mathers replied, finally meeting Monica's gaze. "I'm truly sorry for what happened today. I take full responsibility." "An apology is just the first step," Monica said, her tone softening slightly. "I hope you take this as a learning opportunity. We need officers who understand the impact of their actions." The sergeant glanced at Mathers, his expression stern. "This could have serious repercussions for your career, Mathers. But it could also be a chance for growth if you handle it the right way." Mathers nodded, feeling a mixture of fear and determination. He had never imagined he would find himself in this position, yet he knew he needed to embrace the challenge ahead. As the conversation continued, the crowd began to disperse, murmurs of disbelief echoing in the air. Many had recorded the encounter, and word would spread quickly through the community. Monica took a deep breath, her role shifting from victim to advocate. "I want to ensure this doesn't become just another statistic. I'll be reaching out to the media and community leaders. We need to have honest conversations about policing and accountability." "That's a good idea," the sergeant agreed, looking at her with newfound respect. "It's time for change." As they prepared to leave, Mathers turned to Monica one last time. "Thank you for your understanding. I won't forget this." Monica smiled faintly. "Good. That's the first step." With that, she walked away, her head held high, ready to face the world and advocate for change. Mathers watched her go, a mix of admiration and regret churning inside him. He had a long road ahead, but he felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps he could learn to be the officer he always wanted to be. In the days that followed, the incident became a topic of discussion throughout the community. News outlets picked up the story, and headlines blared about the arrest of the state attorney, highlighting the racial dynamics and the urgent call for police reform. Monica Evans became a voice for those advocating for change, participating in interviews and panel discussions, sharing her experience and emphasizing the need for accountability in law enforcement. Meanwhile, Officer Mathers faced the consequences of his actions. He was summoned for a series of meetings with his superiors and underwent training focused on bias recognition and community engagement. Each session was a wake-up call, forcing him to confront the ingrained prejudices that had clouded his judgment that fateful day. One afternoon, as he sat in a training session, Mathers listened to a speaker recount similar experiences, detailing the challenges people of color faced with law enforcement. The weight of the words hit him hard. He began to understand how his assumptions had not only harmed Monica, but also perpetuated a damaging narrative within the community. Weeks later, Mathers received an invitation from Monica to attend a community forum on policing. It was an event aimed at fostering dialogue between law enforcement and residents, and he hesitated. But something urged him to go, an opportunity to learn, to listen, and perhaps even to apologize in a more meaningful way. When the day of the forum arrived, he found himself standing in the back of a packed community center, heart pounding as he scanned the room. Monica was at the front, addressing the crowd with passion and determination, her presence commanding respect. Well, we need to create a safe environment for everyone where we can trust that the people meant to protect us will actually do so, she was saying. It starts with acknowledging our failures and making real change. Mathers took a deep breath and stepped forward, his heart racing. He felt exposed, but he knew he needed to speak up. As he approached the microphone, the room fell silent, eyes turning toward him. Hi, he began, his voice shaking slightly. My name is Officer Greg Mathers, and I'm here to take responsibility for my actions. Monica looked surprised, her expression shifting from focus to concern as she nodded encouragingly. I made a terrible mistake, he continued. I judged Ms. Evans without knowing her, and I acted on my assumptions rather than facts. I understand how that affects not just her, but everyone in the community. I want to learn from this and be a better officer. The crowd murmured, some nodding in approval, while others looked skeptical. Change takes time, Monica said, her voice firm yet empathetic. But it begins with honest conversations like this. I appreciate you stepping up, Officer Mathers. As the forum continued, Mathers felt a shift in the atmosphere. People began to share their own experiences with law enforcement, and he listened intently, absorbing their stories and the emotions behind them. Over time, Mathers became an advocate for change within the department, working alongside community leaders, including Monica. They organized training sessions for officers, aiming to bridge the gap between law enforcement and the community they served. Months later, standing at a community event with Monica by his side, Mathers felt a sense of purpose. He knew he could never erase the mistakes of his past, but he was committed to learning and growing. As he looked out at the crowd, he saw hope, the hope that change was possible. And in that moment, he realized that it wasn't just about him anymore, it was about creating a better future for everyone. As the months rolled on, Officer Mathers and Monica continued their partnership, fostering a dialogue between law enforcement and the community. They organized workshops and community events focused on education, accountability, and building trust. Each gathering brought together residents and officers, allowing for open discussions about biases, experiences, and expectations. Mathers learned from the community, listening to stories of fear, frustration, and hope. He shared his own journey of growth, admitting his mistakes and the lessons he had learned. With each event, the gap between the police and the community began to narrow, and relationships started to form. Monica's efforts to advocate for police reform gained momentum, attracting attention from local media and government officials. The conversations they initiated sparked discussions on policy changes aimed at increasing transparency and accountability within the police department. Slowly but surely, change was in the air. One evening, during a particularly moving community gathering, Mathers stood in front of a diverse audience, his heart swelling with pride. He watched as residents voiced their concerns and shared their hopes for a safer, more inclusive community. As the event wrapped up, he approached Monica, who was surrounded by community members, thanking her for her work. "You've made a real difference," he said, a genuine smile on his face. Monica looked at him, her expression one of gratitude and determination. "We've made a difference together. Change starts with us, but it doesn't end here." With her words lingering in the air, Mathers realized the significance of their journey. It was more than just repairing a broken trust. It was about building a foundation for a better future, one where everyone felt seen, heard, and protected. As they stood side by side, Mathers felt a renewed sense of purpose. He understood now that his role as an officer was not just to enforce the law, but to serve the community with integrity and respect. Together, they faced the challenges ahead, committed to creating a legacy of understanding and unity. And in that moment, both knew they were on the right path, working toward a brighter tomorrow for all.